Member meetups, in short, are just a fun way for us to get together, talk about something related to behavior analysis. Our guest today, super excited, Nick Green. We can get into details later if it matters, but I ran into Nick 4 years ago. He's been a really good colleague and connection to chat about things, brainstorm things with, and I'll let him describe what he does, who he is, and then we'll jump into the content. So take the floor, Nick.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. That's a really cool format. Thanks, Ryan, for having me join you again on, one of your creative adventures. It's, it's kind of neat to be in like a group discussion because a lot of times we do a lot of one-on-one work. So this is fun and exciting for me. Just about me. I'm Nick. I've been in behavior analysis space in some shape or form for going on 10, 11 years now. So I worked as a clinician for a while, for 5 years. Went to grad school, became interested in OBM and health and fitness, and then along the way, you can see my behavior fit stuff right behind me. So my application is principles of behavior analysis to health and fitness behaviors. So I've just been working on that. It's been a passion project of mine for really, 5, 6 years now. So really, like when I started my PhD program at the University of Florida, I started working on it, just blogging and looking for opportunities. And, Ryan's been instrumental in helping me share my work with people. So I'm always grateful to him. So, so I think, for me, being just one person that kind of studied it, had the, opportunity to explore my passion and interest in health and fitness behavior change in grad school. So a lot of people don't have that opportunity. So I just wanted to give back to people and, put something out there that, really you can study health and fitness and apply it. So, obviously that's my path, and this kind of ties to the whole bias thing, what we'll talk about. But really it can apply to anything, right? So, at the very least, I'm not saying, I say this in my course, right, Yara, that it's like, I'm not saying my model is the best thing or the only way to do it. But at least you have an exemplar to shape your own behavior off of. And so that's kind of my big motivation to do it. So, hey, there's Judy. So, that's kind of it. So just kind of through my work, then I think this is just, layers of experience in consulting down the line. What I've been thinking about is in my course, I talk about bias. And so, I think it's really interesting to think about, there's all kinds of biases in any application of behavior analysis, but for me personally, I have to think about, okay, health and fitness is usually accessible to all. We all have our history of sport or exercise or working out. So we kind of bring that baggage, with us. And so it's hard to kind of keep those things in check when we're making recommendations to people. And so I've been thinking about that a lot lately. So, even for me, like my exercise of choice right now is, functional fitness, CrossFit type workouts. So when I work with clients, it's like, I'm not going to recommend that as a workout. Personally, I think everybody should do it, but if we're looking at the socially valid arguments of what does the consumer want, I'm always thinking about how to not let my own personal experience and what I like influence what the consumer likes. So that's like on the fitness side, and same with like the nutrition piece too. You'll see a lot of people out there that is like, oh, this diet is the way to go. This isn't a ding on any one diet, right? It's not my expertise, but you have somebody says like, oh, you got to go vegan, or you got to go vegetarian, or you got to go pescatarian. So when people start pushing their views on people, then I think that's where this conversation that I kind of bring, I think today it's like, okay, if you are interested and you do take the course, Yara, it's like, if you do go down this nutrition path or whatever it is that you want to do, I just kind of caution people like, okay, let's think about like, what's really influencing our recommendations? Is it our own, right? Is it our own experience, or is it what the individual wants, that you're talking to? Brian, your article there, or your comment of the article of the right to eat donuts and take a nap, right, all day, like that I think starts peeling back the different layers of, like bias of like, okay, there's the client rights, but then I think where the health, as we as a behavior analyst, we got to become an expert in a separate field. Okay, we do know, right? My expertise is in sedentary behavior. I know those risks of too much sitting and inactivity. It's going to have we have to have that customer buy-in, the social validity piece again of, okay, we know if, right, I can point to the research article. If this person wants to sit all day and just hang out. That's her preferred reinforcer, whatever, watch TV, Netflix, right? That is their right, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I guess the extra layer we have with just modern research and technology is that, okay, we do need to educate them on like, here are just the relative risks. Okay, you can do this, but here is the likely outcome. If I'm speaking with, a group of behavior analysts, here in the room, and then others that might see this later, then we have to check in with, the parent or guardian, right? If you have individuals with developmental disabilities that can't make that decision for themselves, then we have to ask that the parent guardian, okay, we do know at this rate, this trajectory, that this person is already obese at 15 years old. If we don't start changing small behaviors now, right, they are likely going to be even more dependent on, medical intervention in the future, right? But again, now that turns into like, I think this is like layer 2. Okay, now I am biased. Well, I think everybody should live independent of intervention lifestyles, right? Or independent of medical intervention. So I don't, as long as it's like, how to say this? It's like, you want to be as healthy and long, as healthy as possible without having to take any, blood pressure medication or, have to use a wheelchair or something like that, right? But that's my own bias. If other people are okay with it, those are just kind of the topics I've been thinking of. Like, okay, let's say I don't care. I think, or just say that, the consumer or the parent says, well, I don't care what they do as long as they're, quote, if they're just fat and happy, that's fine, but that's somebody else's choice, and we can't really change them as much as we want, as much as I personally want to help everybody, I can't. And if people don't want to change, then, it's like that balance, like how much do I push the issue? Let's pretend, let's say you were my client, you have this beautiful gym, right? You have a support, good support system. Then I would look at, something basic, like, is this a skill deficit or a motivation issue, right? It's motivation, in this case would be, okay, has there been any significant events that affected, your likelihood of working out, right? Let's say you just went to the doctor and they said, oh, if you don't do anything now, you need to, you're going to have osteoporosis by next year, something silly like that. It's like, so that could be a significant, right, meaningful event that could, increase the odds of you complying with any instruction that I give you. But then on the skill deficit side, right, it's like, okay, you have dumbbells there. Do you know what to do with them, right? Have you ever been taught, right? And then just based on the conversation that started this, it's, this is your choice. I would love for you to work out because I know the outcomes that will likely, impact your life in positive ways, if you stick with it for the next 5 to 10 years, but that's not for me to decide. You have to decide really. This is kind of the fuzzy, the fuzzy behavior analytic terms that don't really exist for us. It's like, you have to trust me and you have to have skin in the game. We have to build this relationship to like, like with my clients, it's like, you're paying me money to offer you expert guidance. And it's like, if we don't have this trust built up, then it's really not going to work. Because you can Google how to work out. You can Google, the best calorie program for my body type. It's what I'm trying to offer, right? If I'm not trying to sell services, it's the person has to make the decision on their own. And at the same time as the expert guidance as a behavior or, behavior change agent, I have to check my bias and say like, okay, I'm going to help you shape your behavior based on what you want and need, not what I see for you.
There's like 2 ways, reflecting on this, how we try to approach it when I was in practice with adults with intellectual disabilities. And it was either through trying to make it clear to the person receiving services and the treatment team, like what we were making decisions off of. So we'd point to something, and it wasn't to, for example, say that we're always pointing to an article and stuff like that, but it's just like, hey, like, so you know where I'm coming from. Like, this is kind of where my perspective is coming from, things like this that influence it. And then broadening, I guess, the perspectives to kind of review the decision process. And that doesn't mean that they are involved in it. So for example, like I could go to a colleague outside of a treatment team and be like, hey, here's the things I'm going to present. Do you see things that might be an issue on how I'm framing why we should pursue this sort of treatment approach? So that you could get that feedback with someone, like you're saying, that you can trust. So I used to go to behavior analysts that weren't on the case, that were usually within the same organization, kind of how we operated and whatnot, but to essentially do kind of a practice pitch on like what I was going to be saying in like interdisciplinary team meetings, to be like, hey, where's the holes and the things that I might not be paying attention to, that, you know, I might be making some like logical leaps or illogical conclusions, or I might, you know, have something in there that's a bias that I wasn't paying attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially like in the health and fitness space, sometimes, you know, people have no experience, so they just need some general education. Like, okay, they show up, like, what do I need to do? Okay, like, well, let's just make sure that we're following the basic guidelines, and, you know, I focus more on the exercise and activity. It's like, okay, we need to make sure that we're hitting our 150 minutes. We need general activity. You know, that's going to look like, you know, something we need to hit somewhere between 6,000 to 9,000 steps a day, depending where you are. If you want to hit more because of some other weight loss goal that's important to you, then we probably need to crank up those steps, you know. It's the pointing to kind of the government guidelines that are based on the research. And it's just like, you know, again, it's like, if you think this is important to follow, right? I think it's important to follow. I could just make us like, this stranger down the street said that you should run, you know, you should run laps around the building 50 times. Like, that could be an intervention. Or, you know, that we can all agree that the research engine that fuels government recommendations is probably good to follow. But before I forget this other thought, it's, you know, we have all these, you know, became fluent in all these sedentary behavior, too much sitting articles, and everything is always kind of put in this perspective of longevity, and like, it's all about living as long as you can. It's all about risk management. It's like the people that are, you know, fit and healthy, they're going to live, you know, you really don't know how much more they live. It's really the inverse of like, you know, how many people died over the time period. You don't really know how long people live, if that kind of makes sense. But anyway, so where I'm going with this is like, sometimes it's like, maybe this sounds inhumane, but it's like, is long life, should that always be the goal? Like, that's always kind of the inherent, you know, thing that's in like research. It's always about like, these people live the longest, you live the longest life, right? Most people who are fit and healthy will live, you know, 75 to 90 years old. That's just, we're humans, our bodies just don't last that long. But it's like, okay, should we be going toward quantity, quality? What's the mix there? So that's just kind of a random thought. I don't know if anybody here has any opinion on that.
You could look back at their history as well. You know, they could have definitely been in great shape and working out, and, you know, then something in their life, whether it be like an accident or something happens, and then they can't go back to that, you know, that memory kind of muscle, you know, what is it, muscle
memory?
Muscle memory. So, you know, as you're older, you know, you want to do that muscle, you want to get that muscle memory and do it, but you just can't. So there's that point too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have that that mindset that you were talking about, but then the longevity, you have to adapt to life. You know, you're older.
Now, I have a good example of just like a current client that she's mid-30s, single mom, kid is 1-2 years old. She used to be a Division I athlete where she was like working out, you know, what she called beast mode, right? She was just doing 2 days, 5 to 6 days a week. That was her life in her early 20s. As a behavior analyst, we think about what are the environmental contingencies at play to support that lifestyle versus what it is today. And so there's a big, this is a lot of barriers that her and I have to like figure out of like, okay, you know, you want to do all these things, you want to engage in, you know, the things that you know how to do, right? That's your kind of muscle memory point there, Judy. But like, they have current contingencies of work schedule, being a mom, she's moving, it's a different, you know, she doesn't, or let's not forget, everybody, we're still in a pandemic.
Yeah.
This is still very difficult to do. Like, not having social supports, right? We know conditioned social reinforcers are very powerful for any target behavior, especially in the health and fitness space, right? Those are my preferred reinforcers. So again, this is the life that you had before. Here are the environmental contingencies that were in play. You still want that life. It the kind of the hidden, the subliminal message conversation we're having, where it's like, you can't have that life anymore. Like it just doesn't exist. And that's kind of hard for sometimes people to kind of get over that hump of like, okay, if I can't do, 5 days of weight training and 3 days of running each week, I feel so, unmotivated, right? I say, quote, unmotivated because that's a mentalistic interpretation of the environmental contingencies, right? We got work schedule, telehealth, all this stuff. So, but getting back to your point, Judy, there's right, the longevity piece on like just health outcomes, and then the longevity and maintenance as far as like what can you maintain now, given that you broke your leg or you're no longer a D1 athlete. So there's so many variables at play, and then bringing it back to the topic of the conversation today is like, how do I manage my bias through all of this process, right?